How much do you really know about Robin Hood? The Hollywood version of a man in green tights is just the surface of a far deeper legend. This is a journey into the heart of medieval England, where 30 forgotten stories wait in the shadows of Sherwood Forest. You will uncover the complete saga of this complex hero, from his secret piety to his tragic final arrow. We will explore archery contests designed as deadly traps, brutal duels with sinister knights, and the clever tricks that outsmarted a corrupt sheriff again and again. What one quality do you think truly defines a hero? The forest offered no protection that morning. Robin Hood, the most wanted man in Nottingham, walked alone into the town, driven by a faith he could not practice among the trees. He went to attend Mass, to kneel and pray within the stone walls of the church, believing his devotion would shield him. But piety is no armor against treachery. A monk, recognizing the outlaw, saw not a penitent man but a bag of gold. He slipped away and betrayed Robin to the sheriff's men. Captured in the very act of worship, Robin was dragged in chains to a cell, his fate seeming sealed. This is the story told in one of the oldest surviving ballads, a tale that strips away the later glamour to reveal a stark truth. Robin was not invincible. His greatest strength was never his own bow, but the loyalty of the men he led. When Little John and Much the miller's son heard of their leader's capture, they did not hesitate. Their rescue was not a chaotic brawl, but a calculated mission of vengeance and duty. They hunted the treacherous monk on the road, delivering a swift and final justice before marching into Nottingham itself. With cold precision, they confronted the sheriff's guards, freed Robin, and returned to Sherwood not as mere outlaws, but as a brotherhood forged in crisis. This ancient story establishes the core of the legend, not with a grand theft, but with a simple, powerful lesson. Robin's faith made him vulnerable, but the loyalty he inspired made him immortal. That loyalty would soon be tested by a hunter sent from the shadows. The tale of Robin Hood and Guy of Gisborne is no merry adventure in the greenwood. It is a grim story of a professional killer, a man whose very purpose was to end the legend of Sherwood. Sir Guy of Gisborne was not a bumbling sheriff's guard. He was a knight, clad not in shining plate but in a cloak made of horsehide, a sinister figure who moved through the forest like a wolf. He had been hired for one simple, brutal task: to find Robin Hood and put him in the ground. The ballad wastes no time in setting a dark mood. Robin and Guy meet by chance, two armed men circling each other in the lonely woods. Neither knows the other's name at first. They speak of hunting, but the only prey they discuss is the outlaw Robin Hood. Guy boasts of his mission, unaware he is confessing it to his intended victim. And Robin, playing along, suggests a small archery contest between them before the real hunt begins, a deadly game of deception. But the contest turns to conflict, and the two men draw their swords. This is not a cinematic clash of heroes. It is a desperate, savage fight for survival under the trees. Robin, for all his skill, finds himself matched blow for blow. The ballad describes him growing weary, his strength failing against the relentless knight. In a moment of sheer desperation, Robin stumbles and Guy sees his opening. But in that critical instant, Robin's famed luck, or perhaps his sheer will, returns. He rallies, lands a final, fatal blow, and Sir Guy of Gisborne falls. What happens next is the most shocking and macabre moment in the entire Robin Hood canon. To complete his ruse and escape the forest alive, Robin does the unthinkable. He uses his knife to behead the dead knight, then peels the skin from his face. He places Guy's head upon his own bow, and he dresses himself in the knight's distinctive horsehide cloak. He literally wears the identity of his enemy. Disguised as Guy, Robin finds the sheriff of Nottingham, who is ecstatic, believing the outlaw is finally dead. Robin, in his gruesome costume, claims his reward, the promise of safe passage out of the county. He even walks alongside the sheriff, who is gleefully carrying the very bow that once belonged to Robin Hood. The deception holds until Robin reveals himself with a blast of his horn, summoning his men from the trees and turning the sheriff's triumph into humiliating defeat. This story forces us to ask a difficult question: how far would you go to survive? The Robin Hood of this ballad is not just a trickster, he is a man pushed to a brutal extreme, using the very skin of his foe as a shield. It is a stark reminder that these legends were born in a harsh and unforgiving time, where the line between hero and the horrors he faced could, for a moment, become terrifyingly thin. After such a grim encounter, you might expect the outlaw to retreat deeper into the wilderness. Yet the very next ballad in the sequence offers a complete change of pace, trading the horsehide cloak for a simple craftsman's cart. The story of Robin Hood and the Potter is a classic comedy of errors where wit and disguise are the sharpest weapons. Robin, growing restless, stops a simple potter on the road and demands a toll for passage. The Potter, however, is no timid merchant. He refuses to pay and, in a shocking turn, proceeds to thrash Robin Hood in a straight fight. Beaten and humbled, Robin sees an opportunity not for revenge but for a grand jest. He proposes a trade, his fine Lincoln green clothes for the Potter's humble garb and his cart of wares. Robin would go to Nottingham himself to test the sheriff's mood and sell the pottery. It is a plan built entirely on audacity. Disguised as the Potter, Robin boldly enters the marketplace. He sells the pots, but not in the way a real merchant would, practically giving them away to the town's poor and making a spectacle of himself. This, of course, draws the attention of the sheriff's wife, who invites the strangely generous Potter to dine at the manor. The sheriff himself arrives, and over the meal, the conversation turns to the infamous outlaw. The sheriff, boasting, declares he will give £100 to even lay eyes on Robin Hood. The disguised Robin sees his chance and seizes it. He tells the sheriff he can, in fact, guarantee a meeting, claiming the outlaw is known to him. Gullible and greedy for the capture, the sheriff agrees to ride out with this mysterious Potter. The story reaches its peak not with a sword fight, but with another archery contest. Robin leads the sheriff right into the heart of Sherwood, where his men are waiting. He then reveals his true identity, not with violence, but with a display of his unparalleled skill, effortlessly winning the contest and taking the sheriff's money as his prize. He then entertains his captive Gest with a feast in the forest before sending the embarrassed but unharmed official back to Nottingham. This tale is a masterclass in psychological warfare, proving that the most effective way to defeat a powerful enemy is not to break his body, but to mock his intelligence and empty his purse, all while making him laugh along with the joke. Yet the legend of Robin Hood was never just a handful of scattered stories. It needed a grand stage, a single epic that could weave these daring adventures into one sweeping tapestry. That stage is the Gest of Robin Hood, a sprawling ballad that stitches together the outlaw's greatest exploits into a foundational masterpiece. This is not a simple tale, but a complex cycle of conflict, charity, and confrontation that established the core of the legend for centuries to come. The Gest opens with a theme we have already seen, Robin's restless challenge to authority on the road. But it quickly expands into a far more ambitious story, one that introduces the knight, Sir Richard at the Lee, a nobleman brought to ruin not by war but by debt. This was a powerful concept for a medieval audience, a reminder that the wealthy and titled could also fall victim to a cruel system. Robin does not simply rob from this knight, he listens to his plight. Hearing how Sir Richard was forced to mortgage his lands to a greedy abbot, Robin's response is not that of a mere bandit but of a revolutionary banker. He lends the knight the massive sum of £400, enough to reclaim his estate, with only the knight's honor as collateral. This act redefines Robin's mission. He is not just redistributing wealth from the rich to the poor, he is restoring justice and stability, fighting the corrupt financial systems that crushed honest men. Of course, to fund such generous loans, Robin needs a steady income, and the Gest provides it through his relentless war with the Sheriff of Nottingham. Their conflict escalates into a series of brilliant traps and counter-traps. In one famous episode, the Sheriff hosts a grand archery contest, a blatant attempt to lure Robin into the open. But Robin and his men turn the tables, arriving in disguise to win the prize before revealing themselves and fighting their way to safety in a glorious, chaotic retreat back to the Greenwood. The cycle of provocation and revenge continues until it draws the attention of the highest power in the land, the king himself. The Gest introduces King Edward, a monarch who decides to see this legendary outlaw for himself. He does not come with an army, but with a clever plan, disguising himself and his men as monks to travel into Sherwood. The ensuing meeting is a pivotal moment in the entire mythology. Robin, ever the gracious host to holy men, invites the king to a feast. He then demonstrates his men's loyalty and skill, and in a stunning act of devotion, offers himself and his entire band to the king's service. This is the ultimate validation of Robin's character. He was never a rebel against the crown itself, but a rebel against its corrupt local agents. He serves the true concept of kingship, and the king, impressed by his honor and ability, pardons him on the spot. For a time, Robin Hood becomes a courtier, a strange new life that cannot last. The call of the Greenwood and the simple freedom of the outlaw life proved too strong, and Robin eventually returns to Sherwood, where his adventures begin anew. The Gest of Robin Hood is the bedrock. It gave us the charitable hero, the vengeful sheriff, the grateful knight, and the pardoning king. It established the moral code that would define Robin for all time, proving his story was always about more than theft. It was about a deeper, more enduring form of justice. But even a king's pardon could not erase the simple truth of Sherwood Forest. Its deepest shadows held secrets that no royal decree could ever touch. One of those secrets was a bridge, a simple river crossing guarded by a man of the cloth who was anything but holy. This is the story of Robin Hood and the Curtal Friar, a tale where faith meets force in a clash that would birth one of the legend's most beloved characters. Robin, hearing tales of this formidable friar who controlled the only safe passage across the river, saw not an obstacle but a challenge. He set out with Little John, not for a robbery but for a test of wills. They found the friar on the riverbank, a stout, powerful man whose shaved head marked him as a cleric, but whose muscular build suggested a very different vocation. Robin, from the far bank, commanded the friar to carry him across the water. The friar, whose name was Tuck, agreed with a cheer that hid a cunning plan. He hoisted Robin onto his back and waded into the current, but upon reaching the deepest point, he did not set his passenger down. Instead, he tossed Robin Hood into the freezing water. As Robin sputtered and swam, the friar laughed, declaring that he would now gladly carry the devil himself if he came the other way. Enraged and humiliated, Robin drew his bow and ordered the friar to carry him back. Friar Tuck, still laughing, obliged, only to repeat the exact same trick, dumping Robin unceremoniously into the river once more. This was not just a prank, it was a declaration of independence. The river was his domain, and he would bow to no man, not even the legendary outlaw of Sherwood. The confrontation escalated from a watery duel to a true trial by combat. Robin, furious, challenged the friar to a fight, but this was no simple brawl. They agreed to take turns, first with swords, then with quarterstaffs, and finally with bows. The ballad describes a tremendous, evenly matched struggle. They fought with such skill and power that their swords struck sparks from the river stones, and the force of their staffs echoed through the trees. It was a battle that seemed to have no end, a brutal stalemate between two masters of their craft, and in that exhausting, relentless clash, something remarkable happened. Their anger began to fade, replaced by a dawning, grudging admiration. Here at last was an equal. Robin, recognizing the friar's immense strength and unbreakable spirit, realized he had found not an enemy but a potential brother. He blew a blast on his horn, not to summon an attack, but to call Little John, who had been watching the entire spectacle. Seeing his leader locked in a futile fight with this formidable priest, John initially raised his own bow to end it. But Robin stopped him. He then extended an invitation, asking the formidable friar to leave his lonely river and join the merry men in the heart of the forest. Friar Tuck, having tested Robin's own courage and found it worthy, gladly agreed. He shed his isolated life for one of fellowship and purpose. This story is a cornerstone of the legend because it redefines the meaning of strength. Robin's band did not grow through conquest, but through this unique process of challenging and earning respect. Friar Tuck was more than just another strong arm. He was a spiritual figure, however unorthodox, whose presence added a new layer of depth and legitimacy to the outlaw community. He proved that true worthiness is not given, but forged in the heat of honest conflict. But no fellowship, no matter how strong, can last forever. The final story of Robin Hood is not one of victory, but of quiet betrayal and a single perfect arrow. After decades of defying the powerful, his end came not in a glorious battle, but in a silent room at the hands of someone he trusted. The legend tells us that Robin, growing older and feeling unwell, decided to seek medical help from his own cousin, the Prioress of Kirklees. This was a calculated risk, a choice to place his life in the hands of family, a woman who led a religious house, but the Prioress was not the holy woman she appeared to be. She had secretly made an agreement with a bitter enemy of Robin's, a knight who wanted the outlaw gone for good. Her plan was as simple as it was cruel. Under the pretense of treating his illness, she would bleed him, a common medieval medical practice. But instead of healing him, she deliberately opened a vein and left him to weaken, locked away in a chamber of the priory. Robin, realizing the treachery too late, found himself too feeble to fight. He had only one ally left, Little John, who had accompanied him but was kept from the room. With his last bit of strength, Robin managed to sound his horn, a faint, desperate call that brought Little John crashing through the priory doors. John, seeing his leader pale and bleeding, wanted to burn the entire priory to the ground to take revenge on the treacherous prioress. But Robin, in his final moments, showed the heart that had always defined him. He forbade it. He told Little John that he would never harm a woman in all his life, and he would not have that stain on his legend now. He asked for his bow instead. Robin then instructed John to carry him to the window. He knocked one final arrow, drew the string back with the last of his fading strength, and let it fly. He told John to bury him wherever the arrow landed. The arrow flew from the window, arcing across the sky before falling to earth in a quiet spot some distance from the priory walls. It was there, under the open sky rather than in consecrated ground, that the great outlaw of Sherwood Forest was laid to rest. The mystery of his grave at Kirklees Priory has lingered for centuries, a poignant end for a man who lived in the wild woods and chose his own resting place with a final, defiant shot. This story forces us to confront a difficult truth, that even the most legendary lives are fragile, and that trust, the very thing that built his brotherhood, was the one thing that could ultimately destroy him. Even the strongest leader needs a partner who can challenge his authority. Long before Friar Tuck was tossed into the river, another legendary friendship began with a splash. The story of how Robin Hood met Little John is a foundational myth of the Merry Men, a tale that defines their entire code of honor through a single, bruising contest on a narrow bridge. Robin, confident and perhaps a bit bored, was walking alone one day when he came to a slender log bridging a stream. On the other side stood a tall, formidable stranger, a man whose size and bearing suggested he was not someone to be ordered about. The rules of the road were simple, a matter of unspoken pride. Neither man was willing to yield the right of way. Robin, used to command, declared that the stranger should step aside for him. The giant of a man on the other end simply laughed, replying that he would stand his ground. He suggested a more direct method for settling the dispute, a fight with quarterstaffs until one of them tumbled into the water below. Robin, never one to back down from a challenge, agreed. He cut himself a sturdy staff from a nearby oak, and the two men met in the middle of the narrow bridge. The fight was not a graceful duel, but a brutal, powerful exchange of blows. The ballad describes the sound of their staffs cracking against each other, the sheer force of the impacts echoing through the quiet woods. Robin, for all his famed skill, found himself completely outmatched by the stranger's reach and raw strength. After a fierce volley, the larger man landed a single, tremendous blow that sent Robin Hood tumbling headfirst into the cold stream. As Robin spluttered in the water, the victor did not gloat. Instead, he offered a hand, using his own long staff to help the drenched outlaw back onto the bank. In that moment, any anger Robin felt vanished, replaced by pure admiration. He saw past his own bruised ego and recognized a man of incredible valor. He immediately offered the stranger a place in his band, promising him a new suit of Lincoln green and a wage of 20 gold marks a year, but he also asked the man his name. The stranger replied that he was John Little. Robin, with a characteristic laugh, declared that the name would be reversed, for such a large man could never be called Little John. And so, the legend was born from a humbling dunk in a creek. This story cemented the core principle of Robin's band, a true meritocracy where rank was earned, not inherited. The man who could knock the leader into the water was not punished, but promoted to become his most trusted lieutenant and lifelong friend. It proves that the greatest strength a leader can have is the wisdom to recognize a better fighter when he sees one, and the humility to make that man his brother. A new kind of fire came to Sherwood Forest one afternoon, a blaze of crimson silk and fierce skill. The story of Will Scarlet's arrival begins not with a humble request, but with a defiant challenge that nearly ended in bloodshed. Robin Hood and Little John, patrolling the forest paths, spotted a stranger walking beneath the trees. He was unlike any traveler they had seen, dressed not in rough wool but in fine clothes of brilliant red. He carried himself with the confidence of a nobleman, yet he traveled alone and armed. Robin, following his old habit, stepped onto the path to demand a toll from this richly dressed man. The stranger's response was not fear or compliance, but a cold, sharp anger. He gave his name as Will Scarlet and declared he owed nothing to any man, least of all an outlaw of the woods. The argument escalated with terrifying speed. Will Scarlet, his temper flashing, drew his sword. Robin, taken aback by the man's immediate aggression, was forced to do the same. The ensuing fight was a whirlwind of steel. Will Scarlet was not a brawler, he was a master duelist, his blade moving with a precision and grace that Robin struggled to match. The ballad describes a desperate struggle where Robin, for the second time in his life, found himself genuinely overpowered in single combat. It was Little John, watching the deadly dance, who finally intervened with his great quarterstaff, knocking the sword from Scarlet's hand before the conflict could turn fatal. In the sudden silence, breathing heavily, Robin looked at the proud young man in red. He saw not an enemy, but a startling reflection of his own younger self, all pride and blazing skill. He asked Scarlet why a man of such obvious nobility and talent walked the forest roads alone. The answer revealed a familiar story, a man wronged by a powerful lord and forced into exile. He was not a merchant, but a gentleman outlaw in the making. In that moment, Robin's anger melted into recognition. He saw that Will Scarlet's hot temper was the flip side of a powerful sense of justice, and his formidable sword arm would be a priceless asset to the band. The invitation was offered, and after a moment of proud hesitation, accepted. Will Scarlet traded his fine red silks for Lincoln green, but he never lost the fiery spirit they represented. His inclusion changed the group's chemistry. Where Little John brought steady strength and Friar Tuck brought jovial faith, Will Scarlet brought a razor's edge, a necessary intensity that balanced Robin's more strategic mind. He was a reminder that the fight for justice sometimes required not just clever tricks, but a swift and unflinching blade. The fiery intensity of Will Scarlet found its perfect counterpoint in the sweet strings of a minstrel's lute. One evening, as the merry men rested around their campfire, the sound of distant, sorrowful singing drifted through the trees. They soon saw the source, a handsome young man dressed in fine clothes that were now torn and dusty, his face a picture of despair. This was Alan A. Dale, and he poured out his heart to the outlaws in a song of lost love. He told them of his beloved, a beautiful woman he was to marry, until a wealthy old knight used his influence and money to steal her away. The girl's father, swayed by the knight's fortune, had broken the engagement and forced her to marry the old nobleman instead. The wedding was set for the very next day. Robin Hood listened, and he saw an injustice that could not be answered with an arrow or a sword. This was a crime of the heart, a perversion of love itself. He declared that he would not only help Alan A. Dale, he would ensure the wedding never happened. But his plan required more than force. It demanded a brilliant theatrical deception. As the wedding guests gathered at the church the following day, a strange procession approached. Robin Hood and his men, disguised as a band of wandering harpers and singers, entered the holy space. The bishop, prepared to conduct the ceremony, looked on in confusion as the outlaws filled the church with music. Then, at the critical moment when the bishop asked who would give the bride away, Robin stepped forward. He challenged the marriage, declaring that the bride loved another and that this union was a sin against true love. When the old knight protested, Little John, who had been standing by with the strength of a bear, simply lifted the frail nobleman and carried him out of the church. With the unwanted groom removed, Robin then turned to the bishop and made an even more audacious request. Since he had disrupted the ceremony, he announced he would now provide a proper groom. He summoned Alan A. Dale from the back of the church. The young minstrel, reunited with his tearful beloved, stood before the altar. But there was one final problem. The bishop, furious and frightened, refused to marry them. Robin Hood had an answer for that too. He gave a signal, and in walked Friar Tuck, his robes looking only slightly less disheveled than usual. The jovial friar, laughing at the sheer audacity of it all, happily performed the ceremony, binding the two true lovers together forever. This story stands apart in the legend. It shows Robin not as a robber, but as a restorer of stolen happiness. By adding Alan A. Dale to the merry men, he brought music and artistry into the greenwood, proving that their fight was for the beauty of life as well as for its justice. That same spirit of defiance would soon be directed at a man who represented the pinnacle of corruption. The Bishop of Hereford was no humble priest. He was a prince of the church, a man of immense wealth and political power who used his holy office to fill his own coffers. His journey through Sherwood Forest was not a pilgrimage, but a display of that very power, a procession of fine horses, servants, and the jingling weight of collected tithes. For Robin Hood, the bishop was the perfect target, a walking symbol of the greed that poisoned both church and state. The plan was set not with an ambush, but with a song. Robin and his men, disguised as simple foresters, began to sing a bold and mocking ballad about the bishop's own corruption, their voices carrying through the trees to lure the proud churchmen into their trap. Enraged by their impudence, the bishop ordered his guards to seize the singing foresters. It was exactly what Robin had hoped for. With a sudden, coordinated movement, the merry men shed their disguises, surrounding the bishop's party with drawn bows. The guards, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, were quickly disarmed. The bishop, now a prisoner in his own domain, blustered and threatened, invoking his holy authority and promising royal vengeance. But in the greenwood, Robin's law was the only one that mattered. The outlaws did not harm the bishop physically, but they systematically stripped him of his pride and his possessions. They took his fat purse of gold, the rich silks from his pack horses, and even the fine robes from his own back. They then invited him not to prayer, but to a feast. They sat the furious bishop down to a meal of venison and ale. forcing him to break bread with the men he despised. The entire scene was a masterpiece of public humiliation, a lesson delivered not from a pulpit but from the forest floor. Before they released him, Robin made the bishop swear an oath, a promise to never again trouble the people of the forest or misuse his office for personal gain. They sent the churchman on his way, poorer in wealth but infinitely richer in a lesson about true power. This tale cemented a crucial part of Robin's folk hero status. He was not against faith but against its perversion. By targeting a corrupt bishop, he demonstrated that no one, no matter how high their station, was above the law of common decency. The gold taken from the bishop did not linger in the outlaws' camp. It flowed back into the villages, paying rents and filling the bellies of those the church was meant to serve. This was the legend at its most potent, a story that gave voice to the silent anger of the poor against a system that preached piety while practicing extortion. That same bishop would not be the last proud man to be humbled by a song. The Sheriff of Nottingham, still smarting from every past defeat, decided to abandon complicated traps and hired assassins. He would use Robin Hood's own pride against him, crafting a lure he was certain the outlaw could not resist. He announced a grand archery contest with a prize so magnificent it would be talked about for years, a single arrow made of solid gold. The sheriff knew Robin's reputation as the finest archer in England. He was betting everything on the fact that such a public challenge with such a legendary reward would be a temptation too powerful to ignore. The town of Nottingham was prepared for a spectacle, but it was also prepared for an arrest. The sheriff positioned his best men throughout the crowd, their eyes scanning every face, their hands resting near their swords. They were not there to watch the contest. They were there to seize one man the moment he stepped forward to claim his prize. Under the bright sun, the contest began. Archers from across the land drew their bows, and one by one, their arrows struck the target. But one competitor, a rough-looking tanner with a stooped posture and a face smudged with dirt, seemed to possess an unnatural skill. His arrows flew with impossible accuracy, each one splitting the previous until his final shot landed dead center, a feat that left the entire crowd in stunned silence. This tanner, of course, was Robin Hood in disguise. He walked forward to receive the golden arrow, his head bowed humbly. The sheriff, utterly fooled, handed over the priceless prize, completely unaware that he was rewarding the very man he had sworn to hang. The trap had been perfectly set, and the outlaw had not only walked through it, he had taken the bait and sprung the mechanism on its creator. But for Robin, winning the contest was only half the victory. A few days later, the sheriff was sitting in his great hall when a single arrow, fired from an impossible distance, thudded into the central wooden beam of his table. Tied to the shaft was a note. It was a message from Robin Hood, thanking the sheriff for the lovely golden arrow and mocking the official's failure to capture him. It was the ultimate act of bravado, a public declaration that Robin could enter the sheriff's own stronghold, not with an army, but with a single, perfectly aimed shot. This story cemented Robin's status not just as a rebel, but as a folk artist of insult. His greatest weapon was not his bow, but his brilliant, infuriating wit. He proved that true power lies not in building higher walls, but in having the skill to shoot an arrow over them. Yet that golden arrow was more than a trophy, it was a beacon. Its gleam carried through the forest and across the kingdom, all the way to the throne of England itself. For King Edward, these persistent tales of an outlaw who humiliated his sheriffs and mocked his bishops were no longer mere folklore. They were a challenge to the crown's authority, a splinter in the order of the realm. But this king was a cunning man. He understood that you cannot catch a legend with an army, for a legend simply melts into the trees. So he devised a plan not of force, but of clever theater. He would travel to Sherwood not as a king, but in the humble robes of a traveling abbot, his knights disguised as simple monks. It was a test not just of the outlaw's strength, but of his character. The encounter unfolded with the precision of a well-rehearsed play. Robin and his men, ever watchful, stopped the royal party on the forest road. Following their strict code, they demanded a toll from the wealthy-looking churchman. The king, playing his part, protested with just the right amount of holy indignation. Robin, the gracious host to men of God, then invited them all to a feast in the greenwood. He offered them venison and ale, and to showcase his band's loyalty, he proposed a small display of skill. He ordered his men to shoot, and one by one, their arrows struck the mark with breathtaking accuracy. The disguised king watched, his mind surely calculating the sheer military potential of this disciplined band. Then came the moment of truth. Robin, as was his custom with wealthy guests, asked the abbot for a contribution to the poor of the forest. The king, still in his role, refused. This was the trigger. Robin's men moved to search the monks, and in the scuffle, the fine armor and royal bearing of the king's knights became impossible to hide. The deception was over. Robin, realizing he was in the presence of his sovereign, did not react with fear or anger. He knelt. In that single gesture, the entire legend pivoted. He was not a rebel against the crown, but a servant of its true purpose. He explained his life as a fight not against the king, but against the corruption that festered in his name. The king, impressed by the outlaw's honor, his men's skill, and the clear justice of his cause, made a stunning decision. He pardoned them all on the spot. He then invited, or perhaps commanded, Robin Hood and his merry men to leave the forest and join his royal court in London. For a time, the legend of Sherwood seemed to be over. Robin became a courtier, a strange fish in the glittering waters of power. He wore fine clothes, attended the king, and lived a life of comfort he had never known. Yet the call of the greenwood was a siren song he could not ignore. The structured hypocrisy of the court, the whispered politics, the stifling formality, it all chafed against his free spirit. The king's pardon had given him safety, but it had cost him his purpose. His true allegiance was not to a man, not even a king, but to the simple, wild justice of the forest. And so Robin Hood returned to Sherwood. He shed his courtly silks for the familiar Lincoln green, and his adventures began anew. This story resolves the great contradiction at the heart of the legend. It answers the question of where a hero's loyalty truly lies when faced with the ultimate authority. For Robin Hood, the king's pardon was not a reward, but a final test of his own soul, a test he passed by choosing the freedom of the trees over the gilded cage of the court. The quiet life of a courtier could not satisfy a man who lived for the thrill of a clever disguise. Robin Hood soon grew restless for the familiar rush of a well-executed ruse, the kind that pitted his wits directly against the sheriff in the heart of Nottingham. His next scheme was born not from a grand quest, but from a chance meeting with a simple butcher on the forest road. The man was struggling with his cart, loaded down with freshly slaughtered meat destined for the town market. Robin, seeing an opportunity, did not demand a toll. Instead, he proposed a simple trade, his fine clothes for the butcher's bloody apron and his entire cart of meat. The bewildered butcher offered more money than he would make in a year, quickly agreed, leaving Robin alone with a cart full of pork and mutton and a brilliantly simple plan. Disguised as a common vendor, Robin Hood pushed the cart into the bustling Nottingham market, a place where the sheriff's influence was felt in every high price and every tax collector's grasp. But this new butcher did not play by the established rules. He immediately began selling his meat at prices that seemed too good to be true, practically giving it away to the wide-eyed townsfolk. The news spread through the market like wildfire, drawing a crowd of grateful and astonished people. Robin was not just selling meat, he was staging a public demonstration against the very economic oppression the sheriff represented. This, of course, could not go unnoticed for long. The sheriff's wife, hearing of the strangely generous butcher, came to see for herself and was so delighted by the low prices that she invited the man to dine at their manor. The sheriff himself arrived home to find this peculiar butcher at his table. Over the meal, the conversation turned, as it always did, to the elusive Robin Hood. The sheriff, boasting loudly, declared his hatred for the outlaw and his desire to finally capture him. Robin, playing his part to perfection, saw the opening. He leaned in conspiratorially and told the sheriff that he knew exactly where Robin Hood could be found, claiming the outlaw often passed through a certain part of the forest. Greed and gullibility overshadowed the sheriff's better judgment. He agreed to ride out with this helpful butcher immediately, dreaming of the glory and reward that would soon be his. Robin led the sheriff deep into the woods, right into the waiting arms of the merry men. With a laugh, he threw off his disguise, revealing the man the sheriff had just broken bread with. Once again, the sheriff found himself a humiliated guest at a forest feast, forced to pay for his own foolishness before being sent back to Nottingham, his pride wounded more deeply than any arrow could manage. This story is a masterclass in comedic humiliation, proving that Robin's greatest strength was his intimate understanding of the common people. He did not just rob from the rich, he became one of the poor, if only for a day, to show them that the system could be beaten with a little cunning and a well-timed bargain. The grime of the butcher's apron had barely been washed away when Robin Hood met his match in a man covered in filth. He was walking a forest path when he saw a beggar, a pitiful figure in ragged clothes, his face smeared with dirt, hobbling along with a crutch. The man's whining pleas for alms grated on Robin's ears. In a moment of arrogance, Robin decided to teach the beggar a lesson about earning his keep, perhaps by taking the few coins he already had. He stepped forward, demanding the man hand over his purse. The beggar's demeanor transformed in an instant. The whining stopped, the hunched posture straightened, and the crutch was suddenly wielded not as a support but as a weapon. He was no beggar, but a formidable fighter using the perfect disguise. A brutal brawl erupted right there on the road. Robin, expecting an easy victory, found himself battered and bruised. The beggar fought with a wild, unpredictable fury, his crutch cracking against Robin's arms and back with stunning force. This was not the elegant duel of a Will Scarlet or the powerful contest of a Little John. This was a dirty, desperate street fight, and the master of Sherwood was losing. He was thrown into the dirt, humiliated and defeated by a man everyone would have dismissed without a second glance. But as Robin lay there, the beggar offered a hand, not in mockery, but with a hearty laugh. He revealed his name was Nick, a man who had turned to begging after being wronged by a lord, and who had learned to survive with his wits and his fists. The fight had been a test, and Robin had failed miserably. In that moment of painful humility, Robin saw the brilliance of the deception. He realized that his band of outlaws, for all its archers and swordsmen, lacked this specific kind of cunning. He needed someone who could blend into the crowds of the desperate, who could gather information where a man in Lincoln Green would be instantly recognized. He offered Nick a place with the merry men, not for his strength alone, but for his mastery of a different kind of warfare. This encounter forced Robin to expand his very definition of a fighter. A hero was not just the man who could win a fair contest, but also the one who knew how to disappear into a crowd, to use the world's prejudices as his own personal armor. Nick the beggar became one of Robin's most valuable spies, a reminder that true strength in their struggle came in many forms, and that sometimes the most dangerous man in England was the one nobody was willing to see. A new kind of hunter was stalking the deer of Sherwood, and he answered to no king but the forest itself. Robin Hood and Little John, checking their snares one morning, found the tracks of a magnificent hart, only to discover it had already been claimed. A stranger stood over the kill, a man whose green clothes were not the manufactured hue of Lincoln dye, but the muted, practical tones of the living woods. He was a ranger, a professional forester sworn to protect the king's deer from poachers, and he viewed Robin and John as exactly that. He did not draw his bow in fear. He stood his ground, his eyes cool and assessing, declaring that this forest was under his protection and they were trespassing on his domain. The challenge was not just to their actions, but to their very identity. Robin, who saw himself as the true warden of the greenwood, could not let this stand. He proposed a contest to settle the matter, not with fists or swords, but with the weapon that defined them both, the longbow. They would shoot 3 arrows each, aiming for a small, weathered oak stump 60 paces distant. The ranger agreed with a quiet confidence that was more intimidating than any boast. He shot first, and his arrow flew straight and true, embedding itself deep in the center of the target. Robin matched him, his own shaft splitting the wood a hair's breadth from the first. The second round was the same, a perfect mirror of skill that left the 2 arrows vibrating side by side. The air grew thick with tension. For the final shot, the ranger took a long breath, his focus absolute. His third arrow struck the center so perfectly it seemed to make the target whole. All eyes turned to Robin. He drew his bow, the yew wood bending smoothly, but as he released, a sudden gust of wind caught the fletching. His arrow, deflected by the unseen hand of nature, struck the very edge of the stump and stuck there, quivering. It was a clear loss. In that moment, the ranger had proven himself the better archer. But he did not claim victory with a triumphant shout. He simply looked at Robin, not with gloating, but with a newfound respect. He had expected a common thief, but he had found a master of the bow, a man humbled by a fair contest. Robin, swallowing his pride, acknowledged the ranger's superior shot. He asked the man why a forester of such incredible skill served a distant crown instead of the people of the forest. The ranger's story was a familiar one, a tale of a lord who took more than he gave and a system that valued dear over the men who protected them. He had loyalty, but it was misplaced. Robin saw not an enemy, but a man whose ideals mirrored his own, a guardian waiting for a cause worth guarding. The invitation was extended, and the ranger, having tested Robin's character and found it worthy, accepted. He brought a new dimension to the merry men, the official knowledge of the forester, the understanding of game trails and royal laws that made their operations smoother and their sanctuary more secure. His recruitment was a strategic masterpiece, proving that the best way to defend your domain is not to drive out the competition, but to convince him that your cause is his own. Even the greenwood can feel confining for a spirit as restless as Robin Hood. He announced to his men one morning that he was tired of hunting deer. He had a sudden desire to hunt the great fish of the sea. He set off alone for the coast, for the bustling port town of Scarborough, where he traded his longbow for a fishing net. He hired himself out as a fisherman on a small boat, a complete novice in a world of salt and spray. The seasoned sailors laughed at the landlocked outlaw, but Robin was a quick study, learning the rhythms of the waves and the pull of the nets. His luck, however, seemed to have stayed in the forest. After a long, hard day of labor, their catch was pitifully small, a few meager fish that would hardly earn a single coin. As they turned their boat back toward the harbor, a new threat appeared on the horizon. A French pirate ship, its sails billowing, closed in on them with alarming speed. The fishermen panicked, knowing they were defenseless against the heavily armed raiders. But Robin Hood saw not a disaster, but an opportunity. He calmly took command of the terrified crew, telling them to ready the nets one more time. As the pirate ship drew alongside, its crew jeering and preparing to board, Robin gave the order. They cast their heavy net not into the water, but through the air. It settled over the heads of the French pirates, tangling them in a web of rope and lead weights. In the confusion, Robin seized a grappling hook and swung across to the enemy deck, a cutlass in his hand. What followed was not a battle, but a brawl. Robin fought with the same fierce skill he used on land, his blade a whirlwind against the disorganized pirates. He drove them back, their captain surrendering after a short, sharp duel. Robin and the fishermen had captured the ship. The prize was immense, the pirate vessel laden with gold, silks, and spices plundered from other English ships. Robin took his share of the treasure, a king's ransom won not from the rich of England, but from its foreign enemies. he returned to Sherwood not just a hero of the poor, but a champion of the entire coast, a man whose courage knew no borders. This tale reveals a crucial layer of his legend, his deep-seated patriotism. Robin Hood was always more than a local rebel. He was a defender of England itself, proving that his loyalty was to the people of his nation, whether they lived under the canopy of Sherwood or on the shores of the Grey Sea. A dusty road led to a different kind of challenge for Robin Hood one afternoon. He was waiting with Little John when they spotted a peddler approaching, a traveling merchant bent under the weight of his own pack. The man carried a heavy staff which he used to steady himself as he walked, and his pack was filled with pins, ribbons, and other small trinkets for sale in distant villages. True to his practice, Robin stepped into the path and demanded to know what was in the pack, suggesting the peddler might lighten his load by paying a toll. The peddler, however, did not cower. He straightened up, a glint of defiance in his eye, and declared that before anyone looked in his pack, they would have a chance to feel the weight of his staff. He was not a merchant to be bullied, and he welcomed the exercise. The fight that followed was a thunderous spectacle. The peddler spun his heavy staff as if it were a light reed, its whistling arcs forcing Robin to give ground. They traded blows on the sun-baked road, the crack of wood on wood echoing like small thunderclaps. Robin, a master with the quarterstaff, found himself in a desperate struggle, his arms ringing from the force of the peddler's attacks. The stranger was not just strong, he was brilliantly skilled, his movements economical and devastatingly effective. The battle raged back and forth until both men, panting and sweating, reached a stalemate. Neither could gain an advantage over the other. They finally lowered their staffs, each looking at the other with a mixture of exhaustion and profound respect. The fight had been a test, and both men had passed. Robin, his curiosity burning, asked the peddler who he truly was, for no simple merchant fought with such ferocity and skill. The peddler laughed and gave his name, revealing he was often called Alan Adale. He was a man of many talents, a fighter and a singer who took to the road not just to sell wares, but to see the world and escape the confines of an ordinary life. In that moment, Robin saw the perfect addition to his band. Here was a man who could walk into any town unnoticed, a man whose pack was the perfect disguise for a sharp mind and a stronger arm. He offered Alan a place in the greenwood, and the peddler, having found a man who could match him blow for blow, gladly agreed. He traded his pack of trinkets for a permanent home among the trees, his songs and his strength becoming new threads in the growing tapestry of the merry men. This encounter reinforced a crucial lesson for the outlaws, that worthiness was not measured by a man's title or clothes, but by the courage and skill he carried within, ready to be revealed when challenged on an open road. The peddler's road was not the only path where humble appearances hid a fierce heart. Robin Hood and Little John, patrolling the edge of the woodland, spotted a lone shepherd watching over his flock. The man seemed the picture of rustic simplicity, wrapped in a coarse wool cloak and leaning on his crook, a simple lunch of bread and cheese beside him. Robin, perhaps feeling a touch of arrogance after so many victories, decided to amuse himself. He stepped from the trees and demanded the shepherd's meal as a toll for crossing the edge of his domain. The shepherd looked up, his eyes calm but unyielding. He replied that he would pay no toll to any man, and that he would defend his simple dinner with the only weapon he had. He hefted his heavy shepherd's crook, a long, stout staff of seasoned wood. Robin laughed, drawing his own sword, confident this would be a brief and humiliating lesson for the countryman. He was wrong. The moment their weapons met, Robin realized his terrible mistake. The shepherd was not a clumsy farmer. He was a whirlwind of controlled, powerful motion. His crook was not a simple stick, but an extension of his own body, moving with a rhythm born of years of fending off wolves and guiding stubborn sheep. He parried Robin's sword strokes with shocking ease, the crook's curved hook catching and turning the blade aside. Then he went on the offensive. The blows came not with wild anger, but with the devastating precision of a man who knew exactly how to use leverage and weight. He knocked Robin's sword from his hand, then swept his legs out from under him with a low, swift arc, sending the outlaw tumbling into the dirt. Before Robin could rise, the shepherd stood over him, the point of his crook resting gently on Robin's chest. The fight was over. Little John, who had watched the entire encounter in stunned silence, stepped forward, but Robin waved him back. Lying in the grass, defeated and breathless, Robin looked up at the shepherd. He saw no gloating in the man's face, only a quiet confidence. In that moment of profound humility, Robin's arrogance evaporated, replaced by pure admiration. He asked the shepherd where he had learned to fight like that. The shepherd simply replied that a man who spends his life alone on the hills with a flock learns to be his own army. He had no lord, no master, and answered to no one but the sky and his own conscience. Robin, seeing the raw, untamed strength in this man, did the only thing that made sense. He offered him a place with the merry men. The shepherd, having proven his worth beyond any doubt, accepted. He brought with him a unique set of skills, a knowledge of the high, open moors and the quiet patience of one who watches and waits. His inclusion sent a powerful message to the entire band. True strength was not a product of noble birth or fine weapons. It was forged in solitude and hardship, and it could arrive in the most unassuming package, wrapped in a shepherd's rough wool cloak. This story cemented the most democratic principle of the Greenwood, that every man who crossed their path was a potential brother, judged not by his station, but by the courage he carried in his heart. The tanner's hands were stained dark by his trade, a permanent mark of the hard, honest work that transformed raw hides into usable leather. Robin Hood, walking through a part of the forest near the town of Worksop, heard the rhythmic thwack of a tool beating against flesh long before he saw the man. It was Arthur a Bland, a man built like one of the oak trees he used for his tanning pits, his shoulders broad and his arms thick with muscle earned from a lifetime of strenuous labor. Robin, perhaps seeing only a solitary workman, decided to test the man's spirit. He stepped from the trees and demanded a toll for the use of his path. Arthur a Bland set down his fleshing tool, a heavy, bladed implement used for scraping hides, and looked at the finely dressed outlaw without a trace of fear. He declared that he paid no man for the right to walk the earth, and if this stranger wanted a toll, he would have to take it by force. He picked up a heavy quarterstaff that leaned against a tree, a tool for walking that was also a formidable weapon. Robin, amused and confident, cut his own staff from a nearby thicket, and the two men began to circle each other. The fight was a brutal symphony of wood against wood. Arthur did not fight with the elegant precision of a trained knight or the wild fury of a street brawler. His style was one of pure, unadulterated power, each swing of his staff carrying the full weight of his trade, as if he were pounding a stubborn hide. He met Robin's attacks with solid, unyielding parries that sent jolts up the outlaw's arms. Robin, a master of the staff, found himself completely outmatched by the tanner's raw strength and relentless stamina. The ballad describes a desperate struggle where Robin was driven back, his defense crumbling under the tanner's onslaught. With one final, mighty blow, Arthur a Bland swept Robin's legs from under him and sent him sprawling into the dirt, his own staff clattering away. Lying on the ground, breathless and defeated, Robin looked up at the victorious tanner, but Arthur did not gloat or press his advantage. He simply leaned on his staff, a slight smile on his face, and offered a hand to help the fallen man up. In that moment, any pride Robin felt was washed away by a wave of pure respect. He saw that this was no common laborer, but a man of immense fortitude and surprising honor. He asked the tanner his name and his story. Arthur explained his simple life, a life of transforming the rough and raw into something useful and strong, a metaphor that was not lost on Robin. The outlaw realized that the Greenwood needed more than archers and swordsmen. It needed this kind of unshakable, grounded strength. He immediately offered Arthur a Bland a place among the merry men. The tanner, having proven his worth in the most direct way possible, accepted, trading the solitary smell of the tanning pits for the communal life of the forest. His recruitment reinforced a central theme of the legend, that heroism was not the sole property of noble birth or knightly training. It flourished in the most humble soil, in the calloused hands of the men who worked the land and plied the trades that held the kingdom together. Arthur à Bland brought a new kind of resilience to the band, the steadfast, pounding strength of the common man, a reminder that the true backbone of England was not found in its castles, but in its workshops and its woods. The strength of a common tanner was one thing, but the helplessness of the innocent was a far more powerful call to action. News traveled swiftly on the frightened whispers of townsfolk into Sherwood, telling of 3 young squires captured by the sheriff of Nottingham. Their crime was not theft or violence, but a simple twist of misfortune, accused of killing a deer in a forest they believed was free. The sentence was death by hanging, a brutal and public display meant to terrify the populace into submission. For Robin, this was not a matter of tolls or pride. It was a fundamental breach of the justice he embodied. He could not stand by while youth and hope were strangled on the gallows for a minor offense. Disguising himself as a simple potter once more, he blended into the crowd gathering in the town square, his eyes fixed on the grim wooden scaffold. The 3 squires stood bound, their faces pale with a fear that shook the very air. The hangman, a grim figure in a black hood, checked his ropes while the sheriff looked on with cold satisfaction. Just as the official was about to give the order, Robin acted. He did not draw a sword or sound a horn. He stepped forward and offered the hangman a drink from a large leather bottle, his voice a sympathetic mumble. The hangman, thirsty from his grim work, took a long swallow, but the ale was strong and drugged, and within moments the man staggered and collapsed into a deep sleep on the platform. In the stunned silence, Robin threw off his disguise. He cut the bonds of the 3 squires with a swift slash of his knife and shoved them toward the edge of the crowd where Little John and Will Scarlet waited to spirit them away. Then he turned to face the sheriff. He did not flee. He stood his ground on the very stage meant for death, declaring that any man who would hang boys for hunting to feed their families was the true criminal. The sheriff's guards, shaken by the boldness of the rescue and the cheering of the crowd, hesitated just long enough for Robin to melt back into the throng and escape. This story crystallizes Robin Hood not as a rebel but as a righteous protector. His fight was not with the law itself, but with the cruel and selfish men who wielded it as a weapon. By saving the 3 squires, he championed mercy over brutality, proving that his most legendary arrows were the ones he never had to fire. Blood ties can run as deep as the forest shadows. On a day that seemed no different from any other, Robin Hood waited by the roadside with Little John, his eyes scanning for travelers. Soon enough, a man appeared, a peddler bent under the weight of his pack, his face weathered by the sun and his clothes dusty from the road. He walked with the steady, weary pace of a man who knew every mile between towns. Robin stepped forward, his demand for a toll a familiar ritual by now. But this peddler did not plead or threaten. He set down his pack with a tired sigh and looked Robin squarely in the eye, his response carrying a strange mix of weariness and defiance. He said he had little money, but he had a staff, and he was not afraid to use it. The 2 men cut stout staves from the nearby oaks, and the fight began. It was a thunderous contest, the crack of wood against wood echoing through the quiet air. They were perfectly matched, blow for blow, parry for parry, their skills so evenly balanced that neither could gain an advantage. After a long and exhausting struggle, they finally lowered their weapons, breathing heavily and staring at each other with a new, dawning respect. It was in that quiet moment, as they wiped the sweat from their brows, that Robin asked the peddler his name and where he was from. The answer sent a jolt through the entire clearing. The peddler named his home village, the very same place Robin had been born. He then gave his name, and it was one Robin had not heard in years, a name from his own family. This formidable stranger, this master of the quarterstaff, was his own cousin. The revelation transformed the scene entirely. The tension of the fight melted away, replaced by the warmth of kinship and shared memory. They sat together on the grassy bank, sharing a waterskin and stories of a childhood they had both left behind. The peddler spoke of his life on the road, of the freedom and the loneliness that came with it. Robin spoke of his own path, of the brotherhood he had forged in the greenwood. The fierce contest had been a strange and unintended family reunion, a test of strength that revealed a bond far stronger than either could have guessed. This story adds a deeply personal layer to the legend, reminding us that Robin's world was not just one of chosen brothers, but of blood relatives scattered by the same injustices he fought. His own cousin was a wandering man, another soul displaced by the harsh realities of the time, finding his way in the world with a pack on his back and a staff in his hand. Their meeting proves that the threads of family could appear in the most unexpected places, and that the loyalty of the merry men was sometimes just an extension of the ties that had always existed, waiting to be rediscovered on a dusty road. A royal challenge arrived in England not from a neighboring king, but from a boastful prince across the sea. The Prince of Aragon, a Spanish nobleman of immense pride, sent a defiant letter to the court, proclaiming himself the greatest knight in all the world. He challenged any champion of England to meet him in single combat, with a kingdom itself as the ultimate prize. Should the English champion fall, the Prince of Aragon would claim the crown of England for his own. The court was thrown into turmoil, for the prince was renowned for his strength and his cruelty. No English knight seemed eager to face such a formidable and ruthless opponent. When news of this foreign threat reached Sherwood, Robin Hood saw a different kind of enemy. This was not a corrupt sheriff or a greedy abbot. This was a challenge to the very nation he loved. He announced to his men that he would not stand by while a foreign prince threatened their homeland. Disguising himself not as a peasant but as a humble knight-errant, Robin traveled to the appointed field of combat. The Prince of Aragon was a terrifying sight, clad in black armor atop a massive warhorse, his lance pointing toward the sky like a promise of death. The two champions charged at each other, the thunder of hooves shaking the ground. Robin, more accustomed to the stealth of the forest than the formal joust, was unhorsed in the first pass, his own lance shattering against the prince's shield. The Spanish nobleman laughed, dismounting to finish the fight with swords, confident of a quick victory. But on the ground the fight changed. Robin was agile and swift, his movements unencumbered by heavy plate armor. He dodged the prince's powerful, sweeping blows, his own lighter blade finding the gaps in the black armor. It was a brutal, exhausting struggle, a contest between raw power and nimble skill. The prince fought with the fury of a man who believed a kingdom was already his, but Robin fought with the quiet desperation of a man defending his home. After a long and grueling exchange, Robin saw his opening. He parried a mighty overhead strike and with a final, precise thrust disarmed the prince and forced him to yield. The victory was not just personal, it was national. Robin Hood, the outlaw of Sherwood, had become the unlikely defender of the English crown. He did not claim a kingdom for himself, he simply ensured it remained where it belonged. This tale marks a significant evolution in the legend, transforming Robin from a local folk hero into a national symbol. His enemy was no longer just the corruption within England's borders, but the arrogance and threat from beyond them. It was a story that spoke to a growing sense of English identity, a belief that even an outlaw in the greenwood had a stake in the fate of the realm, and the courage to defend it when no one else would. The sting of his last humiliation only sharpened the Bishop of Hereford's desire for revenge. He gathered a small army of his own guards and hired swords, vowing to sweep through Sherwood Forest and finally drag the insolent outlaw to the gallows. This time, there would be no disguises, no tricks, only the raw application of force. News of the bishop's armed pilgrimage reached the greenwood long before the man himself. carried on the nervous whispers of travelers and sympathetic villagers. Robin Hood listened, and a plan began to form, one that would turn the bishop's own rage into the very weapon of his defeat. He would not meet force with force, but with a performance of such convincing weakness that the bishop's greed would overpower his caution. Robin took to his bed in a secluded forester's hut, a place chosen for its appearance of vulnerability. He had his men spread the word through the taverns and market squares, a carefully planted rumor that Robin Hood lay dying, struck down by a terrible fever and too weak to even lift his bow. The story spread like a contagion, and when it reached the bishop's ears, he saw not a potential trap but a divine gift. The thought of capturing a helpless Robin Hood, of parading him through the streets of Nottingham in chains, was a temptation he could not resist. He diverted his entire force toward the rumored location, his heart pounding with anticipation. The bishop found the hut exactly as described, a lonely, poorly constructed shack deep in the woods. He ordered his men to surround it, their swords drawn and bows ready. Then, with a few of his most trusted guards, he pushed the rough wooden door open and stepped inside. The scene was perfectly staged. Robin lay on a simple pallet, his face pale and beaded with what appeared to be sweat, his body wrapped in a thin blanket. He coughed weakly, playing the part of a man on the brink of death. Little John and Much the miller's son stood nearby, their faces etched with what seemed like genuine despair. The bishop, his eyes gleaming with triumph, strode to the bedside. He looked down at the shivering outlaw and began to gloat, listing the punishments that awaited him, the long drop of the noose and the jeering crowds. He demanded that Robin confess his sins and beg for a mercy he would never receive. Robin, his voice a frail whisper, agreed to confess everything. He asked the bishop to lean closer so the holy man could hear his final penitent words. It was the moment the entire charade had been building toward. As the bishop bent down, a smug smile on his lips, Robin's hand shot out from under the blanket. It was not the trembling hand of a sick man, but the strong, sure grip of a warrior. He seized the front of the bishop's rich robes and held him fast. At the same instant, the despair vanished from the faces of Little John and Much. They drew their weapons, and from outside came the sudden, terrifying sound of dozens of bowstrings being drawn back. The bishop's guards were surrounded, a circle of arrows pointing at their hearts from the shadows of the trees. The hut was not a deathbed, but the center of a perfectly sprung trap. Robin rose from the pallet, all feigned weakness gone. He and his men systematically stripped the bishop and his party of everything of value, their weapons, their horses, and the heavy chest of coins the bishop had brought to pay his mercenaries. They then forced the humiliated churchman to sit through another feast, a final, mocking celebration of his own greed and gullibility. Before they released him, Robin made the bishop swear another oath, a promise to never again lead armed men into the greenwood. They sent him back to his cathedral, poorer in treasure and pride, a living testament to the fact that the cleverest traps are not built with rope and wood, but with the carefully crafted flaws of a man's own character. A mother's desperate plea echoed through the quiet of Sherwood, a sound more piercing than any sheriff's trumpet. Robin Hood was resting beneath a great oak when the woman found him, her face streaked with tears and her hands worn from a lifetime of labor. She fell to her knees before him, not as a subject before a king, but as a soul in its final moment of hope. Her 3 sons, her only means of support in a cruel world, had been captured by the sheriff's foresters. Their crime was the great sin of poverty itself, for they had killed a single deer to keep their family from starving. The punishment was death by hanging, set for the very next morning in the town square. This was not a matter of broken forest law, it was the murder of mercy. Robin listened, and his anger was a cold, sharp thing. He did not see a political problem to be solved with a clever ruse. He saw a fundamental wrong that demanded immediate, direct action. He promised the weeping widow that he would not let her sons die, pledging his own life to secure theirs. The plan was audacious in its simplicity, a direct assault on the heart of the sheriff's power. Robin and his men would not go in disguise. They would go as themselves, armed and ready to walk into the very mouth of the beast. They slipped into Nottingham under the cover of a misty dawn, blending into the edges of the crowd that had gathered for the grim spectacle. The three young men stood on the gallows, nooses already around their necks, their faces hollow with a terror that silenced the onlookers. The sheriff stood proudly to the side, savoring his victory over the forest and its people. Just as the hangman was about to push the first boy from the platform, Robin gave a signal. A single, clear note from his horn cut through the heavy air. It was not a sound of stealth, but a declaration of war. At that moment, the crowd itself seemed to come alive. Little John and Will Scarlet surged forward, their swords clearing a path to the scaffold, while Much the miller's son cut the ropes binding the widow's sons. Arrows from the rooftops, loosed by Alan A. Dale and the forester, pinned the sleeves of the sheriff's guards to the wooden posts behind them, a warning shot that froze them in place. In the chaos, Robin leaped onto the platform, his own blade held high. He stood between the rescued boys and the furious sheriff, a wall of green defiance. He did not address the crowd with a grand speech. He looked directly at the sheriff and spoke words that every common person present understood in their bones. He told him that a man who would hang boys for trying to feed their mother was the true monster, and that such injustice would always find an answer in the greenwood. The sheriff, his guards neutralized and the mood of the crowd turning swiftly against him, could only watch in impotent rage as Robin and his men escorted the three sons and their overjoyed mother safely out of the town and back into the embrace of the forest. This tale is the purest expression of Robin Hood's soul. It was not about wealth or winning a contest of wits. It was about the sacred duty to protect those who have no one else, to stand against a system that valued the life of a deer over the lives of three human beings. In saving the widow's three sons, Robin defended the very idea of compassion itself, proving that his most legendary battles were fought not for gold, but for the right of the poor to simply survive. Even the boldest outlaw can be disarmed by a single glance. Deep in the forest lived a ranger, a keeper of the king's deer, as skilled and solitary as the one Robin had recruited years before. But this ranger had a daughter, a young woman named Clorinda, whose fame was spreading through the local villages. She was not known for her embroidery or her gentle manners, but for her unmatched skill with the longbow and her fierce independence, a spirit as wild and free as the wood she called home. Robin, hearing these tales, was not looking for love but for a challenge. He went to find her, expecting to test his skill against a local legend. What he found was a woman who could look at him not as a myth but as a man. Their first meeting was a contest, of course. They drew their bows against each other, and for the first time in his life, Robin found himself facing an archer whose aim was the equal of his own. Arrow after arrow struck the center of the target, a perfect mirror of talent and focus. But the true connection was not in the thud of arrows hitting oak, but in the quiet conversation that followed. Clorinda did not treat him with the awe reserved for Robin Hood. She teased him, challenged his opinions, and spoke of the forest with an intimacy he had never heard from any of his men. She saw the greenwood not as a hideout or a hunting ground, but as a living, breathing home. In her, Robin saw a reflection of his own soul, a love for the same freedom and the same wild beauty. This was not a grand, courtly romance. It was a partnership born of mutual respect. Clorinda did not join the merry men in their camp, for she had her own life and her own duties. Instead, Robin would often slip away to walk with her, to listen, and to share a side of himself he showed to no one else. He was not the leader or the trickster in those moments, but simply a man captivated. This story adds a profound layer of vulnerability to the legend. It reminds us that beneath the Lincoln green and the defiant laughter was a human heart with its own private longings. His love for Clorinda reveals that his fight for a just world was not just a political stance, but a personal one, a desire to protect the kind of beauty and freedom she represented. It was a quiet, personal sanctuary amid the constant chaos of his life, a reminder that even the most legendary heroes need a place to simply be themselves. A foreign accent cut through the familiar sounds of Sherwood one afternoon, the sharp, rolling tones of a man from the north. He was a Scotchman, a knight who had crossed the border into England, and he carried himself with a pride that was both noble and dangerous. His name was sometimes given as Sir William, and he was a formidable sight, armed not only with a sword but with the unshakable confidence of a man who had fought his way through a dozen battles. Robin Hood and Little John, patrolling their domain, saw the stranger riding along the forest track, his tartan cloak a splash of alien color against the green. True to their nature, they stepped onto the path to challenge him, to test his mettle and perhaps lighten the heavy purse that hung from his saddle. The Scotchman did not hesitate. He dismounted, his hand going to the hilt of his broadsword, and met their challenge with a cold, clear gaze. He declared he would pay no toll to any English outlaw, and that he would defend his right to pass with his life. What followed was not a brawl, but a formal, desperate duel. Robin drew his sword and faced the knight. The fight was a brutal clash of styles, Robin's agile English swordplay against the Scotchman's powerful, sweeping strokes meant to cleave a man in two. They fought across the forest floor, their blades ringing, the struggle so evenly matched that neither could gain the upper hand. They were both masters of their craft, and the contest stretched on, each man breathing heavily, his muscles burning with the strain. Finally, in a moment of mutual exhaustion, they stepped back, lowering their points. They stood there, chests heaving, looking at each other across a space of trampled ferns, and in that shared silence something shifted. The anger of the fight drained away, replaced by a profound and grudging respect. The Scotchman was the first to speak, his voice no longer filled with challenge, but with a weary admiration. He asked if all English outlaws fought with such skill and heart. Robin, in turn, asked what brought a knight of Scotland so deep into enemy woods. The answer was a story Robin knew well, a tale of a lord's injustice and a forced exile. The Scotchman was not an invader, but a refugee, a man stripped of his lands and his title for daring to defy a corrupt superior. He was, in every way that mattered, one of them. The universal code of the outlaw had transcended the border between their nations. Robin immediately offered the man the hospitality of the greenwood. The Scotchman, having found a kindred spirit in this unexpected place, accepted. He stayed with the merry men for a time, sharing stories of the Highlands and his own battles against tyranny. His presence added a new, international dimension to the band, a living reminder that the fight against oppression knew no boundaries. When he finally left to continue his journey, it was not as a stranger, but as a brother, his tartan cloak a remembered promise that the spirit of resistance burned just as brightly north of the border. The river's current tugged at Robin's boots as he stood on the bank, his pride stinging more than the chill water ever could. He had demanded that the stout friar carry him across, a command meant to assert his dominance in the greenwood. But the friar, a man of surprising strength and a twinkle of mischief in his eye, had agreed a little too readily. He hoisted Robin onto his broad back and waded into the stream, his laughter booming over the rush of the water. Then, at the deepest point where the current ran swift and cold, he simply let go. Robin Hood, the terror of Nottingham, was dumped unceremoniously into the river. He came up sputtering, his fine clothes soaked and his dignity washed away downstream. The friar's laughter echoed again as he declared he would now gladly carry the devil himself if he came from the other side. Humiliated and furious, Robin scrambled back to the bank and drew his bow, forcing the friar to carry him back, only to be tossed into the freezing water a second time. This was not the meeting of a hero and a holy man, it was the beginning of a brutal, sodden comedy. The real fight, however, was just about to begin. Enraged, Robin challenged the friar to a proper duel. They agreed on the weapons, the humble quarterstaff, a simple, stout length of wood that became an extension of the wielder's own body. The fight that followed was anything but simple. It was a thunderous display of power and skill. They fought from the riverbank into the shallows, their staffs cracking together with a sound like splitting oak. Water splashed high with every blocked strike and sweeping parry. Robin, a master of the staff, found every attack met with an unyielding defense. The friar moved with a surprising grace for his size, his own staff a whirlwind of controlled motion. They fought until their arms ached and their breaths came in ragged gasps, their Lincoln green and brown robes clinging to them, heavy with river water. Sparks seemed to fly not from their weapons but from the sheer force of their clashing wills. It was a perfect, exhausting stalemate, and in that shared exhaustion something shifted. The anger that had fueled them began to ebb, replaced by a dawning, grudging admiration. Here was an equal. Robin, panting and leaning on his staff, looked at the friar not as an obstacle, but as a man of unbreakable spirit and immense capability. He saw the loyalty and humor beneath the fierce exterior. He lowered his weapon, and instead of calling for an end to the fight, he called for an end to the enmity. He blew his horn to summon Little John, not for reinforcement, but as a witness to the birth of a new fellowship. He asked the friar, who gave his name as Tuck, to leave his lonely river and join the merry men. Friar Tuck, having tested Robin's courage and found it more than worthy, laughed his great booming laugh once more and gladly agreed. The man who had been his greatest challenge in the water became, in that moment, one of his most loyal companions on land. The weight of a single gold coin can feel like a mountain when your entire world depends on it. For Sir Richard at the Lee, that mountain was about to crush him. He was a knight of noble blood, but his armor was tarnished and his spirit broken, riding through Sherwood not for adventure, but as a man fleeing his own ruin. His story was a common tragedy in a land where law was a weapon for the wealthy. His young son, his only heir, had gotten into a fight and killed a knight. To save his boy from execution, Sir Richard had pledged his lands as a guarantee for the blood money. The debt was a staggering £800, and the lender was no compassionate soul, but the greedy abbot of St. Mary's. The loan was due, and the abbot, smelling a profitable foreclosure, was waiting with a predatory glee to seize the knight's ancestral home. Sir Richard was not just facing poverty, he was witnessing the erasure of his family's legacy, all for the crime of saving his son. This was the broken man Robin Hood and his men found wandering in their forest. They stopped him as they did all travelers, but they quickly saw this was no proud lord. Robin listened to the knight's tale of woe, a story not of battlefield glory, but of financial entrapment and a father's love. In that moment, Robin saw an injustice that mirrored the struggles of the poorest peasant. The system was designed to break men, whether they wore chainmail or rags, and so Robin of Locksley, the outlaw, did something no bank or abbot would ever do. He offered a loan. He lent Sir Richard the impossible sum of £400, enough to at least stall the abbot's plans, but the terms of this loan were as extraordinary as the lender. There was no written contract, no interest, no threat of imprisonment. The only collateral demanded was the knight's honor. Robin simply asked Sir Richard to swear upon his knighthood that he would return in 1 year to the very same spot and repay the debt. It was a leap of faith that placed a nobleman's word above all the gold in Nottingham. Sir Richard, his hope rekindled, took the money and rode to confront the abbot. The scene at the abbey was just as cruel as he had feared. The abbot and his ally, the Chief Justice, were already dividing up his lands, certain he would fail. When Sir Richard produced the money, their faces fell. The foreclosure was halted, his home was saved, and the abbot's greed was temporarily thwarted. True to his word, exactly 1 year later, Sir Richard returned to Sherwood, but he did not come just to repay his debt. He came with a gift, 100 bows and 100 sheaves of arrows, tokens of gratitude for the man who had saved him. He also came with a warning. He told Robin that the sheriff had raised a large force and was planning a massive hunt. This single episode in the Gest does more than any other to define Robin Hood's unique brand of justice. He was not a mindless rebel against all authority, but a restorer of balance. By helping a noble knight, he proved his fight was against corruption itself, not a specific social class. He recognized that virtue and desperation could be found in a castle as easily as in a cottage. This act solidified his reputation as the only true banker for the honest, a man who valued a person's character over their credit, and who understood that sometimes the most revolutionary act is not to take from the rich, but to give a drowning man a chance to swim. Even the strongest heart can be broken by a betrayal from within. The final journey of Robin Hood began not with a sheriff's army at his heels, but with a slow, creeping illness that left him feeling weary and hollow. He decided to seek help from his own cousin, the Prioress of Kirklees, a woman who led a religious house and should have been a sanctuary of trust. It was a fatal miscalculation. The Prioress was not a woman of God, but a conspirator in a cold-blooded plot. She had secretly allied with one of Robin's oldest and most bitter enemies, a knight named Sir Roger of Doncaster, who had sworn to see the outlaw in his grave. Their plan was as insidious as it was simple, using the guise of medieval medicine as their weapon. Under the pretense of healing his fever, the prioress would bleed him, a common practice believed to restore balance to the body. But this was no act of healing. She deliberately opened a vein and left it to flow, locking Robin in a secluded chamber to weaken and die. The treachery was a slow, quiet poison, far more effective than any sword thrust. Robin, realizing the deception too late, found his legendary strength ebbing away with every drop of blood. He had one last ally, Little John, who had accompanied him but was barred from the room. With the last of his fading breath, Robin managed to sound a single, weak note on his horn. That desperate call brought Little John crashing through the priory doors, his heart sinking at the sight of his pale leader. Furious, John wanted to burn the priory to the ground and drag the prioress to justice. But Robin, even at the end, held fast to the code that defined him. He forbade it. He told Little John he had never raised his hand against a woman in all his life, and he would not have that stain upon his soul now. He asked for his bow instead. This was not a request for vengeance, but for a final, profound act of self-determination. Robin instructed John to carry him to the window. He knocked one last arrow, drawing the string with the final reserve of his spirit, and let it fly. He told his friend to bury him wherever the arrow fell to earth. That final shot was the ultimate symbol of his life, a perfect arrow released on his own terms, choosing his own resting place under the open sky he had always loved, rather than in the corrupt ground of his murderers. The arrow flew, a graceful arc against the grey sky, and landed in a quiet spot some distance from the priory walls. It was there, beneath a venerable oak, that the great outlaw was laid to rest. Yet the mystery did not end with his burial. For centuries, the true location of Robin Hood's grave at Kirklees has been a subject of intense debate and local legend. Some point to an ancient, weathered stone on the priory grounds, while others insist he was secretly buried deep within the forest he called home. Why has this one gravesite captivated people for so long? Perhaps because a hero who lived by his own rules in life deserved a final mystery in death, a secret that the forest itself would keep forever. The king's pardon was a golden cage. Robin Hood and his men traded their Lincoln green for the court silks of London, exchanging the rustle of leaves for the murmur of politics. For a time, the novelty was enough. They were celebrated, their exploits toasted by nobles who would have once called for their heads. Robin stood at King Edward's side, his forest-honed instincts now used to spot a disloyal glance or a whispered conspiracy. Yet the routine of court life chafed against his spirit. The endless bowing, the intricate dances of etiquette, the meals that lasted for hours, all felt like a different kind of performance, one where he could never drop his guard. He missed the honest weight of a quarterstaff in his hands and the unscripted laughter around a campfire. Here, every word was measured, every action calculated for favor. The man who had defied a sheriff with a laugh now had to hold his tongue against a snide comment from a perfumed lord. The conflict was a quiet, constant ache, a longing for the simple truths of the greenwood where a man was judged by his courage, not his courtly manners. This tension finally snapped during a royal hunt in a carefully managed park. The king, wanting to see his legendary archer in action, pointed to a magnificent stag. Robin drew his bow, but as he looked down the shaft, he did not see a king's quarry. He saw the symbol of his own trapped existence, a creature of boundless freedom now cornered for sport. He let the arrow fly, and it struck true, but the victory felt hollow and staged. That evening, as he stared out a castle window at the distant, dark line of a forest on the horizon, he knew. The king had given him acceptance, but he had stolen his soul. The choice became starkly clear: remain in this gilded world and slowly forget who he was, or return to the wild and reclaim his purpose. He sought out the king, and with a respect that bordered on sorrow, thanked him for the pardon. Then he explained that a hawk could not live in a canary's cage. His duty was not to the throne in London, but to the people under the trees. King Edward, perhaps understanding a spirit he could never truly tame, did not try to stop him. Robin Hood shed his silks, gathered his loyal men, and rode north. The return to Sherwood was not a retreat, but a homecoming. The first breath of forest air, rich with damp earth and pine, felt like his first true breath in months. He was an outlaw again by choice, a rebel not against the crown, but against the stifling comfort that would have erased his legend and silenced his fight for good. From fierce duels in the river mist to the quiet rescue of a widow's sons, the legend of Robin Hood spans the full spectrum of human experience. He was a man who could match a knight's sword stroke for stroke, then turn around and orchestrate a wedding for two star-crossed lovers with the heart of a poet. His story is not a single note of rebellion, but a complex symphony of justice, loyalty, and wit. He defended England from foreign princes, outsmarted sheriffs with a butcher's cart, and humbled corrupt bishops with a well-sung ballad. He built a brotherhood not through command, but by recognizing the hidden strength in a tanner, a shepherd, and even a humble beggar. These 30 tales paint the portrait of a hero for all seasons, a man whose true weapon was not his bow, but his unwavering commitment to a world where compassion outweighed cruelty. His enduring power lies in this incredible range, proving that a folk hero is not defined by one great deed, but by 1,000 acts of defiance, large and small, that together form an unbreakable spirit. So, which of these forgotten adventures resonates most with you? Was it his brutal showdown with Guy of Gisborne, the joyous trickery of Alan Adale's wedding, or his poignant final arrow? Share your favorite Robin Hood tale in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into the heart of Sherwood Forest, be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries and legends of the